Have you ever had your entire life flip upside down in a single evening? Not with a bang, but with a word. A quiet, clinical word that takes the reality you've meticulously built over half a decade and exposes it as a complete fiction. I have. One moment, I was standing in the opulent ballroom of the Fairmont Grand Hotel, a glass of champagne in hand, helping my girlfriend of 5 years celebrate her success at her company's annual gala. The next, I was hearing the word that would unravel everything: roommate. Some background is in order. My name is Noah, I'm 38, and until recently, I was a marketing director at a mid-sized tech firm. My girlfriend, scratch that, my ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, 36, is a high-flying pharmaceutical sales executive. Our story was, I thought, a good one. We met at a charity golf tournament, a classic corporate meet-cute. We moved in together after a year, blending our lives, our furniture, and our futures with the easy confidence of two people who believed they had found their person. We weren't married, but we had discussed it. We had a folder on a shared drive titled Future House, filled with real estate listings. We had names picked out for the 2 kids we planned to have. We had, for all intents and purposes, the whole package. The evening of the gala was the culmination of 6 months of a slow, almost imperceptible drift. Vanessa looked stunning, poured into a black designer gown I'd never seen before, a dress that cost more than my first car. The event itself was a masterclass in corporate excess. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Chandeliers dripped crystals from the 20-foot ceilings, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low, constant hum of networking. I had bought a new suit for the occasion, a well-tailored Armani that cost a small fortune. I had wanted to look the part, to stand beside her and reflect the success she had worked so hard for. But standing there, I felt less like a partner and more like an accessory she had reluctantly decided to wear for the evening. While Vanessa worked the room, moving from one conversation to another with a practiced magnetic grace, I was actually enjoying myself. I made small talk with a senior accountant about the stock market and chatted with a product manager about his recent trip to Italy. The food was incredible. The wine was flowing, and for a moment, I allowed myself to relax. I felt a surge of pride watching her, my Vanessa, so confident and powerful, the undisputed star of her own universe. I was so lost in this feeling, so busy playing the role of the supportive partner, that I didn't see her division vice president, a man named Graham, approaching until he was right in front of us. He was in his late 50s, with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his shrewd, calculating eyes. He was the picture of executive power, the kind of man whose approval Vanessa openly craved. He shook her hand, then turned to me, his own hand extended. I took it, offering my most charming, non-threatening smile. "A pleasure to meet you, sir. Noah." "Graham," he replied, his handshake firm. "So, you must be the roommate Vanessa is always mentioning." The words floated in the air between us, detached from reality. The sound of the quartet, the clinking of glasses, the hum of 100 conversations. It all seemed to warp and fade, as if a vacuum had suddenly formed around the 3 of us. Roommate. The word was so absurd, so completely out of context, that my first thought was that I had misheard him. I looked at Vanessa, a confident smile on my face, waiting for her to laugh it off, to correct him with a playful, "Oh, Graham, you flatterer. This is my boyfriend, Noah. We've been together for 5 years." I was waiting for the easy, graceful correction that would put the world back on its axis. Instead, she just smiled, a perfect, polished, corporate smile. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. "Noah and I share an apartment downtown. It's so convenient for commuting." Time seemed to slow down. The VP, Graham, was still talking, making pleasant small talk about the convenience of city living, but I couldn't hear the words. I was watching Vanessa's face. There wasn't a flicker of hesitation. not a trace of shame. She had delivered the line with the effortless ease of someone who had said it many times before. She had, in a single sentence, demoted our 5-year partnership, our shared home, our entire future, to a mere logistical convenience. She had looked at the man she loved and designated him as nothing more than the other name on a utility bill. Graham made his excuses a minute later and moved on, leaving a crater of silence in his wake. I stood there, my champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips, the bubbles dying on the surface. I could feel the blood draining from my face. I was an actor in a play I didn't know I was cast in, and I had just been fed a line that changed the entire plot. I turned to her, my voice barely a whisper, the sound of it swallowed by the noise of the party. Roommate? Vanessa's eyes, which had just been sparkling with professional charm for her vice president, turned cold and hard as they met mine. Don't make a scene, she whispered, her voice a low hiss that was more venomous than any shout. Graham is a traditional guy. He values family, and he thinks workplace relationships are unprofessional. Her response was so quick, so rehearsed, that it was clear this wasn't the first time she'd had to justify the lie. It was her standard operating procedure. We don't work together, I pointed out, my own voice a strained whisper. And since when is having a committed 5-year relationship unprofessional? You don't understand the politics here, she hissed back, her perfectly applied lipstick twisting into a sneer. Then, as if on cue, her face transformed. The hardness vanished, replaced by a dazzling smile as another executive approached to greet her. I was left standing there, invisible once more, my reality completely destabilized. The problem, I realized in that sickening, fluorescent-lit moment, hadn't started tonight. It had started 6 months ago, with an email. It was the official announcement of Vanessa's promotion to Regional Director of Sales. It came with an impressive title, a substantial pay increase that pushed her firmly into the next tax bracket, and a new, demanding schedule. Suddenly, she was traveling twice a month, jetting off to conferences in Chicago, leadership summits in Dallas, and regional meetings up and down the coast. I was unequivocally, unconditionally proud of her. We celebrated with a bottle of champagne that cost more than our weekly groceries, and I toasted to her success, to our success. I saw her victory as a shared one, a testament to the stable, supportive foundation we had built together. To prove it, I threw myself into the role of the supportive partner. I took over the majority of the household responsibilities, the cooking, the cleaning, the management of our finances. I rearranged my own demanding schedule as a marketing director to accommodate her last-minute travel and late-night calls. When she was drowning under the pressure of a looming deadline for a major presentation, I stayed up with her until 3 a.m., acting as her consultant, helping her refine slides and sharpen her talking points. I was happy to do it. This, I believed, was what love was. It was in partnership, an ebb and a flow of support, a joint venture. I was investing in us. Looking back now, I see that I was the only one who still saw it that way. She had already begun the process of divesting. The shift was subtle at first, a series of small, almost imperceptible changes that I rationalized away. She would come home from a business trip full of stories about her colleagues, James from marketing, Sarah from R&D, but she never once suggested I meet them. When I would ask if she wanted to invite her new work friends for dinner, she'd deflect. Oh, they're not really the dinner party type, she'd say, or let's just keep work and home separate. Then came the digital erasure. One night, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and realized I hadn't seen a post from her in a while. I clicked over to her profile and my blood ran cold. Every single photo of us was gone. The picture from our trip to Italy 2 years ago, the goofy selfie from our 3rd anniversary, the picture of me holding the puppy we had briefly considered adopting, all of it vanished. Years of our shared history, scrubbed clean from her public-facing life. When I asked her about it, she was dismissive. I'm just curating a more professional online brand, Noah, she'd explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. My clients and executive team follow me. It's better to keep my personal life private. Her entire persona began to change. She started dressing differently, her closet slowly filling with severe, expensive power suits and designer dresses. When I complimented a new outfit, she wouldn't say thank you. She'd say, it's what professionals in my position are expected to wear. The implication, hanging unspoken in the air, was that I, in my comfortable world as a director at a puddle of a company, simply wouldn't understand the pressures of her corporate ocean. The final red flag before the gala was the lie. She had mentioned the event weeks in advance, but told me it was a strictly employees-only affair, a mandatory internal celebration. I'm a director at my own company. I know that annual galas are almost always partner-inclusive events designed to boost morale and foster a sense of community. A small, ugly seed of doubt was planted, but I crushed it. I chose to trust her. I only discovered the truth by accident when I walked into our home office and overheard her on a call with a colleague, laughing as she discussed what her colleagues' husbands were planning to wear. The lie was so blatant, so unnecessary. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just trying to spare me a boring evening of shop talk. It was only after a long, tense discussion that she reluctantly agreed I could attend, as if she were granting me a favor. And I, desperate to believe that the woman I loved was still in there somewhere, bought a $3,000 suit to prove I could belong in her new world. I see now I wasn't just buying a suit. I was paying an entrance fee for my own execution. The car ride home was a symphony of silence. The city lights smeared across the windows, a blur of color that did nothing to warm the Arctic chill inside the vehicle. Vanessa stared straight ahead, her jaw set, her posture radiating an indignant fury, as if I were the one who had committed some unforgivable social sin. I, on the other hand, was a roiling cauldron of emotions. The initial shock had given way to a white-hot anger, which was now simmering under a thin crust of determined self-control. I refused to have this fight in a moving vehicle. I would wait until we were home, in the space we had built together, and have a rational, adult conversation. I was still naive enough to believe that such a thing was possible. The moment the apartment door clicked shut behind us, the fragile truce of silence was broken. As Vanessa kicked off her $1,000 heels, the sound echoing in our marble entryway, I finally spoke. "What was that about, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice tight but controlled. 5 years. We have been together for 5 years, and tonight, I am suddenly your roommate. She let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind one reserves for a particularly dense child who cannot grasp a simple concept. She didn't even turn to look at me, walking instead toward the kitchen island. "Noah, I told you not to make a scene," she said, her back to me as she unclasped the diamond necklace I'd helped her put on just hours before. "It's not personal. It's professional. My relationship status isn't relevant to my career." "Not relevant?" I shot back, my attempt at a rational conversation already beginning to fray. "You invited me to an event that was explicitly for partners and significant others. How is my status as your partner not relevant at a partner's event?" "I invited you because you kept pushing the issue," she snapped, finally whirling around to face me. She moved to our wine fridge, pulling out a bottle of expensive white wine, a celebratory bottle we had been saving. She uncorked it with an aggressive twist and poured a large glass for herself, not bothering to offer me one. The gesture was small but spoke volumes. This was her victory. This was her world. I was not a part of the celebration. She took a long, slow sip, her eyes cold and appraising over the rim of the glass. "Honestly," she said, her voice dripping with a casual contempt that was more chilling than any shout, "you should be grateful I keep you around at all." I just blinked. The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and poisonous. Grateful? For what? For the privilege of paying the majority of the rent on an apartment where I was a secret? For the honor of being systematically erased from her life while still being expected to help her with her quarterly reports? "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice hoarse. "Let's be real, Noah," she continued, now fully embracing her role as the ruthless corporate evaluator. She was assessing me like a lagging stock in her personal portfolio. "I am on the executive track. I am on pace to make senior leadership in 2 years. My career is a rocket ship." She gestured vaguely in my direction, a dismissive flick of her wrist that was meant to encompass my entire existence. "Meanwhile, you're comfortable." "I'm a director at my company," I reminded her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I make 6 figures. I have supported every single career move you have ever made." She actually rolled her eyes, a gesture of such profound disrespect that it stole my breath. "Your company has what? 50 employees? Mine has 20,000. You're a big fish in a puddle, Noah. I'm swimming in the ocean." She took another sip of wine, her gaze unwavering. "Face it. You're lucky I've kept you around this long. Most women in my position would have upgraded by now." Upgraded, that was the word. That was the verdict. It hit me not like a punch, but like the cold, clean insertion of a scalpel. It was the language of technology, of consumerism, applied to 5 years of love, laughter, and shared life. I wasn't a partner to be cherished. I was a piece of outdated software, a model that was no longer top of the line. I had been weighed, measured by her new ruthless metrics, and found wanting. In that moment, all the anger, all the hurt, all the confusion coalesced into a single point of terrible, absolute clarity. I saw her for exactly who she had become, a stranger wearing the face of the woman I loved. I realized I had two choices. I could fight. I could argue, yell, plead, list my accomplishments, and try to make her see my value. I could try to prove to this cold-eyed stranger that I was worthy of her love, that I wasn't just a placeholder. Or I could accept her verdict. I could agree with her assessment. I chose the latter. The fight she was expecting, the dramatic, tearful scene, would not happen. Instead, I would give her exactly what she wanted, my complete and total capitulation. I looked at the stranger standing in my living room, the woman who had just classified our 5-year relationship as a temporary arrangement from which she had extracted all available value. I saw the smug satisfaction on her face, the unwavering belief in her own superiority. She was waiting for me to argue, to defend myself, to prove my worth. She was expecting a scene, an emotional outburst that would validate her assessment of me as someone not equipped to handle her new, elevated world. I decided in that instant to deny her the satisfaction. An emotional response was a losing battle. A strategic one, however, was a war I could win. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet, devoid of sarcasm or anger. The sudden, complete capitulation was a tactical maneuver she was utterly unprepared for. "I haven't been appreciating your success properly, or the pressure you're under. I haven't been seeing things from your perspective." I took a step toward her, forcing myself to look into her cold, surprised eyes. "I'm sorry." The effect was instantaneous. Her expression, which had been a mask of hardened contempt, dissolved into a state of visible confusion. She blinked, her mind clearly struggling to process this unexpected input. She had been braced for a fight, and I had handed her an unconditional surrender. The confusion lasted only a moment before it was replaced by something far uglier, a slow-spreading smirk of smug satisfaction. She had not only won the argument, she had, in her mind, broken me to her will. She had laid out the new terms of our relationship, and I had meekly accepted them. "Well," she said, her tone softening into a patronizing purr, "I'm glad you finally understand." "I do now," I assured her, my voice a study in sincerity. "It won't be an issue going forward." She seemed pleased with this, her victory now total. She finished her wine, placed the glass in the sink, and we went to bed without another word. The silence was a living thing, a third presence in the room. We slept with a chasm of empty space between us, our backs turned to one another. For her, I imagine, it was the comfortable distance of a superior from a subordinate. For me, it was the quiet, humming darkness of a command center during a sleepless night. She slept soundly, exhausted from her night of professional triumph and personal conquest. I did not sleep at all. I lay there, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, the emotional agony of her words a raw, open wound in my chest. But through the pain, a cold, crystalline logic began to emerge. My mind, trained to build marketing strategies, to analyze demographics, and to execute multi-platform campaigns, began to do what it does best. I was no longer a heartbroken boyfriend. I was a director of marketing, and my new product was my own liberation. I began to formulate the plan, not with rage, but with the dispassionate clarity of a chess master mapping out his next 10 moves. The plan had 4 pillars. Pillar 1, logistics, the immediate physical separation. I needed to move, and it needed to be fast, clean, and happen while she was not there. This would require a next-day moving company, a temporary residence, and absolute secrecy. Pillar 2, finances. We were deeply entangled. A joint savings account, a shared credit card, monthly rent transfers. I needed to methodically and legally sever every financial tie, but not before documenting my own contributions with irrefutable proof. Pillar 3, legal. We weren't married, but we had co-signed legal documents. The lease agreement. More significantly, the ownership agreement for a small cabin upstate we had invested in together. Untangling that would require a lawyer. Pillar 4, professional. The final critical piece. 6 months ago, I'd been headhunted for a position at a major marketing firm in Chicago. The offer was a near triple salary increase and a significant step up in prestige. I had turned it down without a second thought because Vanessa's career was here, because our life was here. That opportunity was my contingency plan, my ace in the hole. I lay there for hours, building the campaign in my mind, running diagnostics, and planning the rollout. I felt a strange and terrible sense of detachment, as if I were orchestrating the life of a stranger. A part of me, the part that still remembered the woman who loved ramen and laughed at my bad jokes, was screaming in protest. But that woman was gone, replaced by a ruthless executive who saw me as an asset to be liquidated, and I would not be liquidated. She left early the next morning for a breakfast meeting, radiating smug energy. As she was dabbing on her lipstick in the mirror, she glanced at me. "I've got back-to-back meetings all day, so don't wait up for dinner," she said, the tone that of a boss giving instructions to an assistant. She was wearing the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 4th anniversary. The sight of them, a gift from a man she no longer respected, cemented my resolve. As soon as I heard her car pull out of the garage, I stood up from the bed. The time for mourning was over. The time for execution had begun. I picked up my phone to make the first call. The moment the sound of her luxury sedan faded down the street, our apartment, once a shared sanctuary, transformed into a cold, quiet crime scene. And I was the lead investigator, meticulously documenting the evidence of a 5-year emotional fraud. My first act was not one of rage, but of documentation. I began executing the plan I had architected in the sleepless, humming darkness of the night. I took out my phone and began to build my case. I moved through each room with the dispassionate focus of a forensics expert. My phone's camera became my primary tool. I photographed everything of value that I had personally purchased since we moved in. Exhibit A, the sprawling leather sectional in the living room, bought with my first director's bonus. Exhibit B, the 75-inch OLED television and the surround sound system I had installed, a source of countless movie nights that now felt like staged performances. Exhibit C, the original artwork I had collected over the years, pieces that she had once called pretentious, but had happily displayed. Exhibit D, the high-end refrigerator and the washer-dryer combo I had purchased when the building's original units had failed. I photographed the serial numbers. I photographed the receipts, which I had stored, as I always do, in a neatly organized digital folder. Next, I moved to the financials. I logged into our joint bank accounts. I took screenshots of my monthly direct deposits that covered 70% of our rent and utilities, a proportional split we had agreed upon when she was still earning less than me, a proportion that had never been adjusted after her salary had eclipsed mine. I documented the paper trail for the $2,000 security deposit on our lease, a lease that was in both our names, but for which I had paid the initial entry fee entirely. I compiled 5 years of financial data, a clear, undeniable record of my investment, not just in our relationship, but in the very infrastructure of the life she now claimed was a benevolent gift she was bestowing upon me. With the evidence secured, I began making the calls. The first was to the moving company. I had actually booked them at 4 a.m. from my phone while Vanessa slept soundly beside me. I explained the situation to the dispatcher with a calm, clipped efficiency. "I need a full-service move out today. My ex-partner will be at work until at least 6 p.m. The move needs to be completed before then." There was no judgment in the dispatcher's voice, just a weary professionalism. "Yes, sir. We get these calls all the time." He explained the steep premium for same-day expedited service. It was worth every penny. My freedom had a price, and I was willing to pay it. The second call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman I kept on retainer for contract negotiations. I gave her the summary. "It's over. We're not married, but we have joint assets, including a property. I'm sending you a file. We need to start the separation process immediately." The third call was to my bank, instructing them to freeze our joint accounts pending a legal review. The movers, 2 strong, silent men in company polos, arrived at 1 p.m. sharp. They moved with a quiet competence, their presence a calming professional force in the midst of my life's demolition. I directed them with the same detached focus I had brought to the documentation. This, and this, not that. This stays. They wrapped my furniture, my electronics, my life, in thick blue blankets, securing them for a journey to a destination I hadn't even finalized yet. As they lifted the heavy sectional, I felt a single sharp pang of grief. I remembered the day we bought it, how we'd celebrated with cheap pizza and beer on the floor because we didn't have a coffee table yet. I pushed the memory down. There was no room for sentimentality today. Today was about logistics. By 3 o'clock, the apartment was transformed. It was a hollowed-out version of itself, a space defined by what was no longer there. My home office was gone, leaving a rectangle of unfaded paint on the wall. The living room furniture I'd brought from my previous apartment was gone. The entertainment system was gone. My artwork was gone. The gaps were jarring, like missing teeth in a once perfect smile. The rooms echoed with a profound emptiness. What remained belonged to her, the decorative items she'd selected, the kitchen table she'd picked out, her clothes, of course, and the bed. I had instructed the movers to leave our bed. She could keep that memory. With the truck loaded and gone, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The life we had shared felt like a distant dream. All that was left was to deliver the final message. I took a piece of plain white paper from the printer I was leaving behind. I wrote 4 simple words, a direct callback to the designation she had assigned me. I placed the note in the center of the vast, empty kitchen island. A stark white flag of surrender that was, in reality, a declaration of war. It read, "Good luck paying rent, roommate." I left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Good luck paying rent, roommate." I had already covered my half through the end of the month, a final severing act of cold responsibility. But I didn't just move out. I moved on with a plan. My sleepless night had been spent architecting the 4 pillars of my new life, and the calls I'd made that morning were the activation sequence. The call to my bank wasn't just to close our joint accounts. It was to initiate a complete financial audit of our 5-year relationship. Every shared expense, every vacation, every gift, all of it was to be documented and assessed by a forensic accountant. The call to my lawyer wasn't just to inform her of a breakup. It was to begin the legal process of dissolving our shared assets, specifically the vacation cabin we co-owned upstate. This would be a complex and legally fraught untangling. And the third call, the most important one, was to my own professional future. 6 months earlier, I'd been aggressively courted by a major marketing firm in Chicago, a global powerhouse compared to my current company. They had offered me a role that came with nearly triple my salary, and a title that would place me in the upper echelons of my field. I had declined because Vanessa's job was here, and I believed our life was here. Now, I called the headhunter back. I asked if, by some chance, the opportunity was still available. It was. By late afternoon, I was checking into an anonymous corporate hotel suite downtown. I felt a grim sense of accomplishment. Phase 1 of the extraction was complete. I had physically separated myself, secured my finances, and laid the groundwork for a new future. I believed I had seized control of a narrative that had been brutally taken from me. I thought I understood the full scope of the problem. I was wrong. I was only looking at the tip of the iceberg. As I was unpacking the few clothes I'd brought with me, my phone rang. An unknown number with a local area code. I answered, expecting it to be a follow-up from the moving company. Noah speaking. "Noah, it's Graham Taylor." The voice was calm, deep, and instantly recognizable. It was Vanessa's vice president. My mind raced, trying to compute why this man would be calling me. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue," he continued, "but this is a bit awkward. Are you and Vanessa still together?" The question was so direct, so unexpected that I was momentarily speechless. How did you get my number?" I finally managed to ask. "You gave me your business card at the gala last night," he explained. "You said to reach out if our company ever needed any marketing consultation. I kept it because, frankly, something felt off about your situation. I had a gut feeling," I confirmed, my voice flat, that Vanessa and I had just broken up. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Graham spoke again, his voice was heavy with a tone I couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps, or professional courtesy. "I thought so," he said. "Look, I'm probably overstepping here, but as one professional to another, I feel there's something you should know." I sat down on the edge of the perfectly made hotel bed. "Okay," I said, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "The reason I called you her roommate last night," Graham began, "is because that's how she's been describing you for months. At every meeting, every corporate dinner, whenever your living situation comes up, you're the roommate." It struck me as odd, but I figured it was your business. He paused again, and I could hear him take a breath, as if bracing himself to deliver the final blow. "But it's more than that. She's also been seeing someone else from the company, a man named Charles from our legal department, and they've been quite open about it at work events you weren't at." The hotel room, with its generic art and muted color palette, seemed to tilt on its axis. The floor felt like it had dropped away from under me, leaving me suspended in a state of nauseating freefall. The word roommate at the gala wasn't a one-time lie to appease a traditional boss. It was her established cover story. It was the foundation of a double life so audacious, so brazen, that I could barely comprehend it. How? How open? I asked, the words feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. PDA at the last corporate retreat in Scottsdale, Graham said, his voice a dispassionate list of facts. Sharing rooms on business trips. It's been going on for at least 4 months. To be perfectly honest, Noah, the assumption among the senior team was that you and she had some kind of arrangement, that you were aware of it. And there it was, the final, most humiliating piece of the puzzle. In the eyes of her entire professional world, I was not just a roommate, I was a fool. A convenient, complicit doormat who provided a stable home base while she conducted a sordid affair with a colleague. My carefully planned, dignified exit suddenly felt naive, inadequate. My response had been calculated to match the insult I had witnessed, but I hadn't even known the true depth of the betrayal. I thanked Graham for his honesty, my voice a strained rasp. I ended the call and sat there on the edge of the bed, the phone still clutched in my hand, my knuckles white. My hands were shaking. The anger I had felt the night before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that was now erupting in my chest. This changed everything. My measured response was no longer sufficient. This level of deception required a response of equal magnitude. The carefully calculated exit was about to become a carefully calculated demolition. The hotel room, with its generic art and muted color palette, seemed to tilt on its axis. The floor felt like it had dropped away from under me, leaving me suspended in a state of nauseating freefall. The word roommate at the gala wasn't a one-time lie to appease a traditional boss. It was her established cover story. It was the foundation of a double life so audacious, so brazen, that I could barely comprehend it. How? How open? I asked, the words feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. PDA at the last corporate retreat in Scottsdale, Graham said, his voice a dispassionate list of facts. Sharing rooms on business trips. It's been going on for at least 4 months. To be perfectly honest, Noah, the assumption among the senior team was that you and she had some kind of arrangement, that you were aware of it. And there it was, the final, most humiliating piece of the puzzle. In the eyes of her entire professional world, I was not just a roommate. I was a fool, a convenient, complicit doormat who provided a stable home base while she conducted a sordid affair with a colleague. My carefully planned, dignified exit suddenly felt naive, inadequate. My response had been calculated to match the insult I had witnessed, but I hadn't even known the true depth of the betrayal. I thanked Graham for his honesty, my voice a strained rasp. I ended the call and sat there on the edge of the bed, the phone still clutched in my hand, my knuckles white. My hands were shaking. The anger I had felt the night before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that was now erupting in my chest. This changed everything. My measured response was no longer sufficient. This level of deception required a response of equal magnitude. The carefully calculated exit was about to become a carefully calculated demolition. I had intended to exit with the quiet dignity of a wronged but respectable man. Now, I felt no such constraints. Dignity was a luxury afforded to those in a fair fight. This wasn't a fair fight. This was a clandestine betrayal of the highest order. My righteous anger had curdled into something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. Resolve. If she could build her professional life on the foundation of my deception, then I would demolish that foundation. Within the next 48 hours, I initiated what I now recognize was the going nuclear phase of our separation. It was a series of 5 precise, strategic strikes, each designed to dismantle a pillar of the world she had so carefully constructed. Strike 1. The financial front. I called my lawyer back. Change of plans, I said, my voice devoid of the emotion I felt. Regarding the cabin upstate, review the co-ownership agreement. There should be a penalty clause for a forced withdrawal. I want to invoke it immediately. Force a sale as soon as possible, at whatever the market rate is. I knew the market was in a downturn. I also knew the penalty clause would hit her invested capital hardest. It was a targeted financial strike. Strike 2. The domestic front. I drafted a formal email to our landlord. I was polite, professional, and unequivocal. Please accept this as my official 60-day notice that I, Noah Caldwell, will not be renewing the lease for apartment 12B. I will be vacating the premises and removing myself from any and all future rental agreements. I paid my portion of the rent for the next 2 months online. A final clean transaction. I had just started a ticking clock on her home. She now had 60 days to either find a way to afford the exorbitant rent on her own or find a new place to live, all while her life was imploding. Strike 3. The professional front. External. My former company had presented me with a generous counteroffer to entice me to stay. I called my now former boss at HR to officially decline. When she expressed her disappointment and asked for an exit interview reason, I was careful with my words. I'm relocating to Chicago due to personal circumstances that have made my current situation untenable, I said. Unfortunately, my significant other's recently revealed relationship with a colleague at her own company has necessitated a swift change of scenery. I named no names. I made no accusations. I simply planted a seed, a professionally documented reason for my abrupt departure that pointed a quiet, undeniable finger in Vanessa's direction. Strike 4. The social front. I logged onto my long-neglected social media accounts. I crafted a single upbeat post. Some exciting personal and professional news, I wrote. Thrilled to announce I've accepted a senior director position with a top firm in Chicago. Can't wait to start this new chapter. The Windy City, here I come. I attached a professional headshot. Then I tagged a half-dozen mutual friends, people I knew were central nodes in our shared social network, ensuring the news would propagate through the grapevine and land on Vanessa's screen within the hour. I was seizing control of the public narrative before she even knew there was one to control. Strike 5. The internal detonation. This was the final and most devastating move. I called my cousin, a man named Mark, who worked as a data analyst at the same massive pharmaceutical company as Vanessa, albeit in a completely different division on a different campus. Mark and I were close. I told him everything. The roommate comment, the lies, the call from her VP, the affair with Charles from legal. I knew my cousin. I knew he would be righteously furious on my behalf. And I knew that in a company of 20,000 people, the corporate gossip chain was the most efficient information network on the planet. I had just lit the fuse. All I had to do now was wait. The calls from Vanessa started that evening. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, as I was looking over the contract for the Chicago position in the quiet of my hotel room, my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for a moment, my heart giving a single hard thump against my ribs. Then, I set it face down on the desk and let it ring until it went to voicemail. A few seconds later, a notification popped up. A new message. I had promised myself I would not engage, but I had not promised myself I wouldn't listen to the impact reports as they came in. I opened the voicemail. Her voice was not pleading or sad. It was sharp, imperious, and filled with an indignant rage, as if I had deeply inconvenienced her. "Noah, call me immediately," she commanded. "I just got home." "Where is all of your stuff? The couch, the TV, the fridge? What is this, some kind of joke? If you're trying to make a point, it's been made. This is childish and insane. Call me." A string of angry texts followed in rapid succession. "Are you seriously moving out over one comment? This is the most dramatic, immature thing you have ever done. You better have my key." I read the messages, my face impassive. I saw not the words of a heartbroken partner, but the fury of a queen whose subject had inexplicably abdicated. I did not respond. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, I let it go to voicemail and continued reading my contract. The second message was different. The indignant rage had been replaced by a note of high-pitched, confused panic. The social media post had clearly found its target. "Chicago," she shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. "You're moving to Chicago. You accepted a job in Chicago without even talking to me. What is going on, Noah? What are you doing? This is our life you're blowing up." It was fascinating the way she framed it. In her mind, her secret months-long affair was not blowing up our life, but my reaction to its discovery was. I slept soundly that night for the first time in months. The next morning, as I was meeting with a realtor to discuss listing my car for a quick sale, the first signs of the true cascade began to appear. A new text message, this one stripped of all anger, containing only the cold, sharp edge of pure fear. "Why is our landlord calling me about the lease? He says you gave 60 days notice. Is that true? I was having coffee when the next one came in. I just tried to pay for my dry cleaning with the joint card, and it was declined. What did you do to our account?" And then, just before noon, came the text I had been waiting for. The one that confirmed the internal detonation had been a direct hit. It was a single, frantic line. Why is Simone from HR asking me and Charles about our travel expenses from the Scottsdale retreat? What did you do? The carefully constructed wall between her personal and professional life, the wall she had used to hide her affair and exclude me, had been breached. The gossip I knew would now be spreading through the company's internal channels like a virus. Her carefully curated image as a sharp, untouchable executive was beginning to fracture. For the next 24 hours, the messages continued, a real-time log of her world collapsing. She learned about the forced sale of the cabin from our shared real estate agent. She learned that her professional reputation was now the subject of intense and widespread speculation. She learned that the life she had taken for granted, a life built on my financial support and emotional fidelity, was being systematically dismantled. The calls and texts kept coming, but I screened them all. I was a silent observer, watching the logical, inevitable consequences of her own actions play out. By the evening of the third day, her tone had changed completely. There was no more anger, no more confusion, no more indignant rage. All that was left was the hollowed-out sound of absolute defeat. One final voicemail came through. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken by ragged sobs. "Noah, please, I'm sorry," she wept. "I'm so sorry. What I said to you, it was horrible. It was cruel. You were never, ever just a roommate. I don't know what I was doing. Please, I'm begging you, just call me back. I don't know what to do." I listened to the message twice. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a profound sadness for the woman she used to be, and for the man I had been when I loved her. This broken, pleading voice was the inevitable result of the choices made by the arrogant, cruel executive who had dismissed me 2 nights before. They were the same person. I deleted the voicemail, along with all the others. I had been her roommate. I had been her charity case. I had been her fool, but I would not be her savior. By the week's end, I had signed the contract for my new position in Chicago, put a deposit on a lakefront apartment, sight unseen, and was preparing for the cross-country drive that would serve as the final, definitive border between my past and my future. 2 weeks after the gala, as I was loading the last of my boxes into the back of my car in the hotel parking lot, a taxi pulled up. Vanessa got out. The composed, powerful executive from the gala was gone, replaced by a version of her I barely recognized. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her usually immaculate hair was unkempt, and she was wearing a simple sweatshirt and jeans, looking small and lost. I wasn't surprised to see her. My hotel wasn't a secret. I had used our joint credit card to book it initially before switching to my personal one. A deliberate breadcrumb I knew she would find. A part of me had been expecting this final confrontation. "Was this all because I called you my roommate?" she asked, her voice cracking, getting straight to the point. "No," I replied, the first word I had spoken to her since leaving her apartment. I closed the trunk of my car and turned to face her fully. "It was because when I objected to being called your roommate, you looked me in the eye and told me I was lucky you kept me around at all." "I didn't mean it," she whispered. "I was stressed about work. I was showing off for Graham. And for Charles," I interjected, my voice quiet but unyielding. "Were you showing off for the married man from the legal department you've been sleeping with for the last 4 months? She flinched as if I had physically struck her. The colour drained from her face. "Graham told you," she breathed, the statement a confirmation, not a question. "Everyone's told me, Vanessa. In their own way. Apparently, I was the only person in your entire corporate ecosystem who didn't know." "I made a mistake," she pleaded, taking a step toward me. "Several mistakes. I know that. But this, destroying my career, my financial security, it's disproportionate, Noah. It's cruel." And there it was. Even now, amidst the wreckage of her own making, her primary concern was a warped sense of fairness. She couldn't see that her actions, the months of gaslighting, the systematic deception, the profound betrayal, were the truly disproportionate acts. My response was merely the Newtonian physics of consequence. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For a moment, watching her stand there, a ghost of her former self, I felt a flicker of something ugly curdle in my gut. My righteous anger had perhaps led me to a place I never intended to go. I had never set out to be the kind of person who engineers another's destruction. "You're right," I admitted, and the honesty of it surprised even me. Some of what happened, the speed at which it all cascaded, I didn't anticipate that. A glimmer of hope sparked in her eyes. "Then help me fix it," she begged. her voice gaining a desperate urgency. Talk to HR. Tell them you were angry, that you made it up to get back at me. I never talked to your HR department, I said truthfully. The investigation was a result of your own colleagues talking about what they had seen with their own eyes. That was all you. I looked at her, at the woman who had demanded my gratitude for the privilege of being her placeholder. And no, I won't lie to protect you. She stared at me, mascara finally streaking down her cheeks in 2 black rivulets. I loved you, you know, she whispered. It wasn't all fake. I opened my car door. A funny thing about love, Vanessa. It requires respect, which, apparently, even as your roommate, I didn't earn. I got in my car and started the engine. I drove away without looking back, but I saw her shrinking figure in my rearview mirror, a lone, desolate figure in a vast, empty parking lot. Chicago was waiting. It's been 6 months. My career at the larger firm has taken off. It turns out my skills were highly marketable beyond my little puddle. I brought in 2 major new clients in my first quarter, and the promotion they hinted at is already on the table. I've made new friends. I've started seeing someone, a corporate attorney who, on our 3rd date, introduced me to her colleagues with a simple, unthinking, "This is my boyfriend, Noah." The casual respect of it almost brought me to my knees. Vanessa, I've heard through mutual friends, was reinstated at work after a lengthy investigation, but was demoted and stripped of her regional responsibilities. Charles was transferred to another division. She's living in a much smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Sometimes late at night, I still wonder if I went too far. If triggered by betrayal, I became something I never wanted to be. Vindictive, calculating, cold. But then I remember her face as she dismissed 5 years of my life, the casual cruelty of her words. I didn't just move out. I demolished a life that was built on a lie. Was it proportionate? Probably not. What I do know is that the price of self-respect is sometimes impossibly high, but it is always worth paying. 3 months ago, she sent me a lengthy email. It was a real apology, one without excuses or blame. I appreciated the closure, but I didn't respond. Some chapters are better left closed. The truth is, revenge doesn't feel good. Not for long. Once the initial, fiery satisfaction fades, it just feels empty. What feels good is rebuilding. What feels good is moving forward and realizing, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that your worth was never, ever dependent on someone else's validation in the first place.